right, everybody, welcome to the IAG Thursday thing. This thing we do every Thursday, rain or shine. It's a whole lot of rain here right now. But we make sure we get to this thing every Thursday, and sometimes we have cool people on, sometimes we just have random topics. You know what? But this week we got cool people on. I'm pretty excited about it. As usual, I'm joined by my co-host Warranty.
Hello, sir. We do
How
this
are
again.
you? Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
okay.
dude,
I've learned a great deal about how the world actually works from Tinder. Not the theory that's found in the textbooks, but how it actually works.
what you found out real quick is people are shallow, terrible humans.
Oh my gosh. Like the last one was I had a coffee date lined up for, I think, a Friday morning, and the person unmatched on Thursday night. Like, why? Why would you do such a thing?
I'm so sorry, man. We are joined this week by somebody I really admire. They've been doing a whole lot of really good, informative, deep dive YouTube content in the past few years. And just putting a lot of really, really good information out there for people to digest. And so I'm really stoked to have him on the show today. But today we have John from Flatirons Tuning. What's up, man?
How you doing, guys? Thanks for having me on the podcast.
I'm stoked to have you here, man. And like I was just saying a second ago, we may have some differences in opinions on certain things, but you have put out some absolutely stellar info, and you guys all would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't check out their YouTube channel. They've put out so much good stuff, and I honestly, just as a Subaru enthusiast myself, I know how much work goes into that, and I just thank you. We all appreciate that, and I think everybody owes you a thanks and for just putting that info out there. It's really awesome to be able to go grab a good YouTube video link and give it to somebody and know they're getting good info from it. It's really good. So
well, thank you very much. That is high praise from you, especially. And Dewey, don't worry. I don't think our opinions on most things are as far off as you think, but
we're
going to get into it and we'll figure it out.
We'll get into it. I understand how you have to approach certain things on YouTube, and then what we're going to do is approach something that probably I think our opinions are pretty spot on. And we're going to chat about some stuff because, man, that was ugly. But either way, we're going to get to it. But so honestly, I know you mostly from internet content and some conversations we've had in the past, but I don't know much about you. So okay. I'd really like to know what some of your background was. I mean, starting, first off, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, sure. Okay, so my name is John Cooley. I run Flatirons Tuning here in Boulder, Colorado. So we're in Boulder, which is, if people aren't familiar with Colorado, we're about 20 or 30 minutes outside of Denver, which is the big city. There's a school here, University of Colorado, which I graduated from. And as far as like how I got into car stuff, just basically I've been an enthusiast. And I stumbled across Subarus when the WRX first came out. That was when I kind of became aware of them. So that was probably 2001, 2002. Ironically, there was a guy that lived in the same apartment complex that I did that got a WRX wagon as soon as they came out, and befriended him, and that was what started it. And to people that are in Colorado or that might know, that was Harvey Epstein, who is now Subaru tuner extraordinary, the Boost Creep.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, Harvey and I lived in the same apartment complex. He got a Subaru. He got me the bug. I got a Subaru there shortly thereafter, and I guess, as they say, the rest is history.
Nice. So basically,
Cool.
A cool guy in your apartment complex got a car that you were already kind of interested in, and then it just spiraled off the deep end after.
Yep.
Yep. I know all about that.
Well, and then so the funny part of it is, so I was involved in the community for a handful of years, and
Yep.
Flatirons Tuning was around. Flatirons Tuning was part of it was inside the Subaru dealership here in Boulder, Flatirons Subaru, and being involved as I got wind that they needed somebody some help in the parts department to run or to help with Flatirons Tuning, and so I went in there and applied, and so from we'll just say the 1st of January 2006 to present, I've worked here at Flatirons Tuning.
Oh, okay. So you've actually been in the industry. You've got me beat by a pretty long ways too, that's really saying something.
It's been a little while.
You've been around a minute, dude.
Wow.
So you are legitimately OG. So by the end of this show, we're going to be comparing NASIOC member numbers, and you might be the first one to have beat me.
No, almost
No?
certainly not. I don't think so.
wow.
No, I was late. I was very late to NASIOC.
Were you an iClub guy like I was?
In fact, no. I was. We had a local group here in Colorado called All Wheel Drive Pirates that I was.
Okay.
I think I was member number like I don't know, something in like the 50s. But we came off of Club WRX. But that's all.
Okay.
That was my forum involvement. So I was actually very late to the NASIOC game.
Really? Okay. Well, oh man, I'll find somebody sooner or later.
Yeah.
So Flatirons Tuning. So this is interesting because I wasn't sure exactly where Flatirons came from. One of my questions was going to be, where did the name come from? Well, it sounds like it was a dealership, and then this was a tuning arm of a dealership, then, huh?
Right. Well, so Flatirons. It's a weird name for sure.
Yeah.
So there is a rock formation in the foothills right behind Boulder called the Flatirons. And what they look like, just these big slabs of rock, like they're huge, and they're just right behind Boulder. And so, like a lot of the pictures you see of Boulder, these big flat rock formations you see, those are called the Flatirons. And so there's a ton of businesses around here that are Flatirons, fill in the blank. And so Flatirons Subaru, that's what it is. So it has nothing to do. The funny thing is that there's a flat iron that is a hair product, apparently. Had nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. It's
nothing to do with hair product.
No,
Good to know.
Yes, just in case there was some confusion there, but yeah, it's just, I guess it's this local thing that well, it's what we've been called, and it stuck, and I don't think we're ever going to change it.
Well, I mean, once the name's there, it's there. You don't really want to mess with it. I mean, there's some goofy names out there. I've definitely heard goofier. And at this point, you have name recognition. You don't want to. You don't want to screw with that too much. So.
Yes. We're grandfathered.
Are you guys still working with the dealership? Like, are you still an arm of the dealership of sorts?
Yeah. So, okay. So how that worked is the son of the owner of the dealership was also an enthusiast. So this is the driver of our Pikes Peak car, Scott Crouch. He drives the rally car. He's an enthusiast. Okay. And so again, when the WRX first came out, he got excited about rally. He got a car, got a rally car, started out going out and competing in Rally America at the time. Fun fact, he met Tanner Faust. Tanner Faust is from this area. And so Tanner was our first driver, and Scott was the co-driver. And so we worked with a few different guys and basically had the Flatirons rally team, and then kind of, inspired by that and maybe a couple other things, decided to bring on some, performance parts to what the dealership had on offer for the parts department. And that was the origin of Flatirons Tuning. And what happened about, I would say roughly 10 years ago or so, maybe I think it was around don't quote me on this, 2014 or 2015, is we got to the point where as Flatirons Tuning, we were big enough that there just was not enough physical space in the dealership to house us. And so that's when we moved off site, and we're about a block away from the dealership, and we've been here ever since. And so now we have our own brick and mortar location. And just keep doing what we're doing.
Super cool.
Now,
so
you were telling me
it was basically a racing arm that turned into a full shop then.
That was part of the. I think there was some negotiation as far as, well, hey, if we're selling these parts and we're using these parts, or we have a race car that we can promote the parts, then it all kind of made way more sense.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and that's kind of how it started to progress. And at this point now, Scott owns the dealership. And so like he's running the whole thing, and I'm just running the Flatirons Tuning part of it.
Yeah.
Now, you were telling me before we started recording that it was helpful to move the business out of the dealership, even though you're still affiliated, because it did cause some confusion between the performance side of the house and the traditional dealer side. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so I mean, it didn't come up a lot, but it came up enough that, I mean, it was something that we were aware of, where just such that, if you're a Subaru dealership and you can get an aftermarket part, or, like somebody can buy an aftermarket part and they put it on their car, then they have their car in for service, and there's any kind of issue with, let's say the warranty, it brought up a lot of, or it had a tendency to bring up some confusion as far as, well, why can I buy this here if it causes an issue over here?
And I could see that in a heartbeat being a problem.
Yeah.
This is why we can't have nice things.
This is why we can't have nice things. And it was something that we would navigate. I mean, it was not the end of the world, but it was just something where, truly it was a space issue. We just needed to hold more inventory than we could over there. But at the same time, it just simplified things significantly to bring us over here.
Sure.
And it's been way better just having that kind of clear differentiation. Just makes I think lives on both sides of the business there much easier.
And I'm assuming you guys still work real close with that dealership too.
Oh yeah, I mean I mean, we anybody that's looked at our website sees that we sell Subaru parts. Well, that's how we get them. We get them from a block up the street, and we have access to the Subaru catalogs. We can find a lot of stuff that way. I can go over there. I mean, I know a lot of the techs over there still, get questions answered. It can be just really helpful to have those guys as a resource for sure. And sometimes they send people over our way. And every now and then, a tech will come over and ask us a question like, hey, I'm seeing this. Can you help me with this, or what's going on here? Yeah, it's a good relationship to have.
That's cool.
So
say what you will, Dewey. Say what you will. I think it's cool to have a performance shop attached to a dealer.
No, I think I never have any issues with that. I think I could see how having really similar names might be a problem, but look at like ESX. They were attached to a Subaru dealer for a long time, but they had a drastically different name. They even sold ESX, Subarus, like ESX right off the lot, which was really crazy. But so you've got your own Subaru early, so we're talking what, 0203 is probably the time frame that you picked up your first one?
Yeah, 2003.
So you were first gen US domestic market WRX kid like I was.
Yep.
And then what did you get for your first one? Like what, and how far did you take that? Do you still own it? Did you sell it? What happened to it? Let's hear your first Subaru story.
Sure. So, my first WRX was a 2002 white wagon. Basically just went a little ways with that, simple bolt-ons, again, very involved the community, took it to the track some. And then I this was again 2003, 2004. This was right about the time when all of a sudden this idea of swapping an SR20 DET engine into a 240SX started to really get a lot of momentum, and that seemed really exciting to me. So I may have drifted into, pun intended, I guess, into an SR20 swap 240. Had that for about a year and a half, 2 years, and that was a fun car. But I mean, here in Colorado, we have winter, we have snow. I couldn't drive it as much as I wanted to, and then that was actually right about the time that I got hired here at Flatirons. I ended up selling that and getting my second WRX, which is now a 2003 yellow wagon, that's the one that I still have today. So yeah, on that car.
You still got your Sonic yellow wagon then, huh?
Yes.
That's sick.
Very cool. That's
what's up.
I love that car. I've replaced darn near everything on that car. I've now done the suspension twice. And then I need to. I'm gonna put a 6-speed in it here shortly, and then I'm don't quote me on this, but then I think I'm done, and I just want to go out and drive the thing.
Well, we'll see in a year where you sit with that.
Yes.
Heard that so many times.
I know.
Which 6-speed would you put in it?
I have got. It's it's a complicated set of circumstances. It's actually out of a 19 STI. And so,
Okay.
one of the first videos we did was, the easy STI swap, which I love the 2007 STI transmission because it just is so easy to swap into the older cars. It's
Right.
kind of, it's like it checks so many boxes to be an easy swap, whatever. I ended up coming into this 19 STI transmission, and the goal is to put it in because we've done it the easy way. Now we're going to do it the harder way. But show people what it's like to do, because it doesn't have the speed sensor on the transmission. How do you deal with that? Deal with the wiring, wiring a DCCD controller, that sort of thing. So that's the plan, and it's all it's all there, but just things keep coming up, and haven't had a chance to put in the car yet.
Oh, it's the worst trying to work on your own car. Oh my God.
Ask him how he knows.
Yeah.
Oh man, do I know?
Yes.
The 19 STI has the speed sensors from ABS, right? And
Correct.
then it also doesn't have the center diff helper. The what is it?
I'm interested. That's something I haven't. I'm really big. I don't know. I almost want to call myself a DCCD enthusiast, but I haven't got to tear apart or look at the newer. I think it was 18 plus. They made a change to DCCD, so it supposedly is not using the helper diff anymore. But it still has the same torque split, and I'm really interested to see if there is actually a physical change to it, or it was just a, Subaru word salad.
Yeah, well, I think it's just Subaru word salad because
I think so too.
Yeah, if anything, it doesn't have the viscous component, so you don't have any lockup without any kind of current going to the DCCD. And the early, I think it's the 04, 05 center diffs also did not have any viscous components. So those are the ones where if you don't have any current going to the center diff, it's wide open.
Open.
Right.
Yep.
Like you can do like rear wheel drive donuts and stuff like that, seemingly.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like they returned to for 18 plus. And if you give me a second, I can pull out the exact wording because Dewey and I looked into this a few years ago.
Yeah, we've looked into it, but I haven't. So I would be really interested, and I think the community would be interested if maybe you get a hot second, you yank off that tail shaft real quick and take a peek.
Dude, I just had it rebuilt. It's literally.
Man.
Okay.
Right?
Oh man, for the community.
Take one for the team, for the community, dude.
All right.
Okay, I've got it. I got it in front of me. Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
So let's see. Here's my file. Okay. So 2017 WRX STI and prior. This is the language they used. Symmetrical all-wheel drive with DCCD featuring 3 performance modes. Blah blah blah. Mechanical and electronically controlled limited slip center differential. And if you go to 2018 and beyond, they start saying new electronic DCCD all-wheel drive system in place of the previous mechanical plus electronic. The change provides optimal differential control for improved vehicle cornering, stability, and handling. So they deleted the word mechanical from it.
Yeah, it's most likely just the removal of that viscous component. Yeah.
Honestly, it makes that, to me, a more desirable transmission. And the vehicle speed sensor problem, you're just going to get around that using probably DCCD Pro's unit, their VSS simulator or something, right?
Map DCCDs, VSS.
Yeah, same concept,
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Just go off the tone rings. The thing that I'm curious, the plan is I got their fancy unit that actually connects to all 4 tone rings, and so then you can potentially, I don't know if I want to go this far, but you can actually play with the split front to rear. So you can kind of make sure that you're in the load cell that you want to be for the differential behavior that you want. It's more of a rally car thing, so I don't think me on tarmac it would come up as much. But yeah, we do have a rally car, so if I can play around with it and I can figure out that there's a benefit to it, then maybe it's something that we would apply to the rally car as well.
I mean, might as well play with it. I haven't had a chance to really screw with my map DCCD setup in my time attack car, but it's something I've wanted to mess with. Now that we got the M-Tron, we might play with it a little more. But I think there's time to be had even on tarmac with some custom DCCD mapping. I think it, depending on the car and the behavior you're looking for, I think it could be there.
I'm told that there absolutely is. It's just it's a little bit daunting to look at how all those things work. And like with the map DCCD, there's 4 different zones that you're kind of controlling how they overlap to get the behavior. And it's a little bit intimidating. One of these days I'm going to have to sit down and try and figure it out. Or I've actually had one of the guys from Map DCCD, Matt, on the podcast, and might have to get him back on and have him go into more detail as far as how do you actually want to dig into this thing and start making changes and see what
I would love to listen to that podcast. So if you get that together, I would I would love to be a fly on that wall. That would be great.
It's been on my mind. It's been on my mind for sure.
I'm once again, giant DCCD nerd. I love DCCD and everything to do with it.
Yeah, it's wild how much of a difference it makes, and it for the guys who are looking
how simple
to do
of a system it is, how well it works is incredible.
Yeah, for sure. And to have that something that gives you control, so that you can. I mean, that was one of the things that was most interesting with actually both the rally car and the Pikes Peak car when you put it in there. Got Scott in the car and those different maps, have him go out there and try it, and the characteristics of the car are different, and you find one that it works. You feel more comfortable. It works better, and that's just where you stick. And like that confidence and being able to feel that change is significant, I think.
Yeah, it's something I think you're going to feel immediately. And the lower the traction, the situation. So I bet you the rally car would benefit from it immensely.
Yeah. Oh, it did. It did for sure.
Oh, cool.
So in the chat, we had.
What do you got?
All right, go ahead. In the chat, we had Johnny Trans. He jumped in and immediately said, I could pull off a 2020 STI tail shaft and verify for all of us.
Oh, yeah. Get to it, my dude.
Thank you very much.
What are we doing, Johnny Trans? I got to have him on the podcast, too. He's a lot of fun. He's one of our regulars in our chat lately, and he's full of good stuff.
Nice.
So, all right. Well,
so you've done the history. You still have your second car, which is the Sonic Yellow Wagon. Amazing.
Which is sick.
STI swap coming in the future.
I love that car. Yeah.
So,
all right. So you are still affiliated with the dealership. So that kind of brings the history to the present, which is you make a bunch of content like Dewey does, and we all sincerely appreciate it because there's a lot of garbage out there. And what you put out on the podcast and the video is far from garbage.
Yep.
Thank you very much. That's always the goal.
And I know a lot of people need more, these days, big entertainment and stuff like that. And, if I actually highly appreciate that you haven't went that route and you've kept it very just straightforward technical.
I'm trying to, it's one of those things where it's there's always the temptation to kind of do more of that. And honestly, I think I kind of want to do more of that. And part of even coming up with the idea of a podcast and capturing the conversations that we do is to kind of make some of the stuff that we talk about more entertaining. And I think it's done a decent job at that. But yeah, ultimately there's so many interesting problems and questions with these cars that I find it just like it's consuming, and figuring it out and trying to explain it and put it into a video. I mean, there's just something about that I really enjoy, and it's worked out well. And obviously, it's something that seems like other people enjoy too. So that's something that we'll absolutely keep to doing.
Yeah, cool. keep at it, man. And if there's anything we could do on our end to help out with that, we're down. More content, the better, especially when it's community support.
Yes.
So we gotta talk about the elephant in the room, my guy.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So the elephant in the room is you made a video. It is YouTube. I understand that you have to use particular titles, okay, to get people to click on it, and even most of the content in there. In fact, I will even go as far as to say I don't disagree with most of what you're saying in there, and it is, but the title is a bit misleading. The title of the video is "Troubleshooting Why Your AOS Doesn't Work."
Well, and to be fair, Dewey, I actually added the troubleshooting part. Originally, it was just why your AOS
doesn't work.
Now, so a little bit of background. First and foremost, air oil separators. There's a lot of them out there.
Oh yeah.
A lot of them are similar, but there are variations.
I agree.
Out there. And for most people, they work well, but then there are some people that have problems. And in one of the, well, and I mean, I'm sure that as you're answering questions, you've run into this too, where you have somebody that has an air oil separator installed, but they're having an issue with it. It's not working right for some reason, whatever that could be. And one of the things that I've come to realize, or like because we get a lot of these questions, is that there's a lot of people that are having an issue with an air oil separator, but they don't actually maybe even realize that they are having an issue. And the inspiration,
I agree with that too.
Yeah, the inspiration for this was one of the guys here at the shop, which we've done some videos on it. He had an engine failure. And in talking to Spencer about his engine failure, what had come up was he was running an air oil separator for the whole time that he had the engine in the car, because this is his second engine failure. From the first engine failure on, he'd been running an air oil separator, but he'd also been using oil pretty regularly. And it just never kind of clicked that, well, hey, if I have an air oil separator, but I'm also using oil, there's something going on here. There's some other issue that I need to dive into. And that is kind of what kind of planted the seed, got us thinking, and where this video comes out of. So this is why your AOS doesn't work. But that was not to mean that all air oil separators don't work at all. But I think that that's kind of, in certain circumstances, how people kind of ran with the topic or the information discussed. And so it was a little confusion.
There was a little bit of confusion there. It did actually bring up some good discussion. Okay. And one of the you said something that hit my ear kind of ugly when you said it, but now I'm my one good ear. And the more I've thought about it, the more I don't disagree with it, but that it was a Band-Aid.
Yes.
And the reality of it is that's true. But the problem we're running into isn't like the AOS itself. Like, the system works, okay? And there's different, again, we can debate, we can go on. There's different brands out there. I mean, honestly, as long as you're not running a Prova / Grimspeed one, it's going to be doing something, okay?
Right. Well, and so I still think that it's better to categorize an air oil separator as a Band-Aid than a solution. And
it took me about a week to come around to the idea, but I also don't believe that the solution is kind of what you brought up with a dry sump.
Okay.
Okay.
So
this comes from somebody who owns a dry sump. Okay, I run a dry sump on my car. I do not run an AOS on my car because I have a dry sump.
Well, and this is where one of the difficulties, and this is what I became really aware of with the response to that video, is that what's hard with an air oil separator is, I think what we all want is a clear-cut, black and white solution. Is this a solution? Is this a fix, or is it not? And the hard thing with an air oil separator specifically is that there's a lot of gray area in there.
There is. And that's why I'm less
challenge.
Mad about calling it.
You don't have to say Band-Aid.
Yeah, it's well. I mean,
well, let's
talk about the essential. Let's dive into this video, and let's talk about the concept of what an air oil separator is trying to fix or remedy or help with. Okay.
Right.
And the reality of it is, Subarus have awful crankcase pressure issues. Their PCV is garbage. Yeah. Okay, and you end up getting a lot of oil vapor into your intake, and that causes oil consumption issues. And anytime you add oil to your intake tract, you're effectively lowering your octane. And so
a lot of bad things can happen from it.
A lot of bad stuff when you start adding oil. And even like the newer direct injection cars that aren't BRZ FRS, because of that, the more of that vapor you have in there, it starts caking up the back of your valves, even more so. It's not going to completely take care of that, but it is an issue. There's a lot of in a dry sump.
Well, it's even more of an issue with the direct injected cars because you don't have the fuel wash, so you get a lot more carbon buildup. So this is where you hear
that
about
carbon buildup's awful, and even with an AOS, you're still going to get some, but it isn't anywhere near to the same level.
Right.
So that's that's what we're trying with an AOS, and me working in IAG, I'm going to say we. That's what we're trying to help with that, but.
Well, and let me just throw in here too, because it's worth saying, because a lot of people thought that from that video I meant that the IAG AOS or all AOSs don't work. One of the very best ones on the market, and I called it in one of our air oil separator buyer's guides, actually, is the Swiss Army knife of air oil separators is the IAG air oil separator. So it's not that they don't work, and the IAG is one of the very best ones out there for sure. And it is, there's a lot of need for it when you have oil moving through the PCV system. So again,
but again, calling it a Band-Aid, I don't think is unfair. The reason for that, the AOS is trying to cure a symptom. Okay.
Correct.
But the actual cause of it, unfortunately, the AOS cannot fix. Okay.
It's crankcase pressure.
And it honestly, let's just be real. It's an engine designed in the early 90s, and we're asking it to do things it was never originally designed to do. It has its own issues. And Porsches even have, that don't have dry sumps built in from the factory, do the same thing. Okay. Not quite to the same degree, but they do. I'm not going to just globally say it's a flat engine issue, but flat engines tend to be pretty bad about it.
Yes. And actually that was my biggest point in trying to make this video is to state that really what the issue is, it has to come down to crankcase pressure. So the reason that air oil separator is, as you say, is addressing a symptom is it's capturing the oil that is moving through the PCV system, but the cause, what is moving the oil through the PCV system, is that crankcase pressure. And so, and I feel that detail has been maybe lost or overlooked a bit in the years that have come since we started putting these on the cars. And I think the more that people can be aware of the fact that the crankcase pressure is what is moving the oil through the PCV system, the better, because one, it helps troubleshoot things, and two, I think from the standpoint of the aftermarket and trying to find a solution, because ultimately this is what it's about. It is trying to find a solution, and by a solution I mean something that you put it in place, and then this problem is really corrected, it's rectified, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
But that's where I don't believe the dry sump is the fix for that either. Unfortunately, the fix.
Let's wait to go
there. Is a different engine.
Yes. Well, but the point here is that I think if we think about crankcase pressure it by itself and start thinking about, what can we do about crankcase pressure? That's what's going to help a lot of these engines work better. And I'll use myself as an example. Okay. It's the very first time. So what? And again, I'm sure that you've seen this, Dewey, talking to more and more people with air oil separators, in that you get the weird thing with air oil separators. The first thing that was just kind of weird is that you don't have 100% consistent results. Like you talk to 8 or 9 people that put on an air oil separator, it's working, it does everything they need it to do. Then you talk to this guy, number 10, that he's having some kind of a problem or an issue related to it that the air oil separator should fix, but he's still having the problem or it doesn't fix it. And you're trying to figure out why that is. And so that's been the motivation for me to kind of go out there and try and figure out
it's
what's
really
going on.
Depend. Yeah. So you're going to have to look at, external situations. I will say if you, and I'm going to be fairly adamant on this. If you have a sub 400 horsepower car that you're street driving and maybe occasionally taking to the track or whatever, and you're running one of our Street Series AOSs and your car is in perfect functioning condition. Okay, so assuming that you don't have, a bunch of pressure getting around your rings, you don't have weird vacuum leaks, your car is in proper operating condition, there is no reason that air oil separators should not work as its intended way. So, and and let's say we've got, 9 out of 10, and then you've got that one odd guy. That one odd guy is probably got something else going on.
Well, so this again was one of the motivations for trying to make this video. It could be an installation issue. There could be something to do with the plumbing, the positioning, the routing of the hoses, whatever, where there's some kind of a problem just in how the thing sits in the engine bay that could be causing it to not function properly.
Yep.
The drainage can cause problems. Like I mentioned, the 3MI drain hose that allows you to drain to a lower point.
Yes.
That really helps the drain function more efficiently. That can solve a lot of problems.
If you're, which I love that hose, by the way. If you are, I think the reason I said 400 horsepower is we're talking stock location turbo, everything's kind of where it should be. But yeah, when you start moving things around, so let's say rotated turbos, different intercoolers, stuff like that, strange intakes, all sorts of goofy stuff where you have to move stuff around in your engine bay for whatever reason, and things are not in their original positions that they were intended to. Sometimes there can be some unintended consequences from that. Draining
100%.
is definitely one of them, and I will be the first one to tell you that.
Yeah, and age too. Like that's. If you've had the AOS on your car for 2, 3, 4 years, and then all of a sudden you start having issues, you start to see that you're moving oil into the turbo inlet, you're having oil consumption or whatever, it could be something where like the hoses have gotten old, something has moved, something has pinched off the hose, it's not breathing properly. You've got to go in there and address that fitment. So there's all of these factors that come into play to why guy number 10 is having an issue where the other 8 or 9 did not.
Now we need to then. Yeah. So what was presented as more of a solution, though, was a dry sump.
Yep.
And all of these things that you're saying with the hose is a little goofy, things break down, seals, whatever it may be, leaks getting introduced, maybe. You're getting a little more leak down around your rings, things of that nature.
Sure.
Those all play the same way with a dry sump, and I know that personally.
They certainly can. The biggest thing though is that a dry sump you block off the PCV system. The PCV system is gone. All of those things are plugged.
You have to run some form of vacuum regulator. If you're not, you're being crazy.
Well, you don't. We don't. There's actually a better way to do it.
I would love to chat with you about that and what better way you feel that there is to do that, because I don't know how you could do it better than putting a vacuum regulator on it.
It's just kind of you connect the tank to the crankcase. So you
connect the sump itself to the crankcase.
Let me try and because we're talking here, so let me try and paint the picture for. Okay, so what is a dry sump? So a dry sump. It just means that you're not storing the oil underneath the engine. You're storing the oil in an external tank.
This is in fact, let's take a real quick step back here, and you're very right for doing this. Yeah. This is why I really like having conversations with people who understand how to make content, because you know when to say, hold up, we need to explain this. You're doing a very good job of that, and I appreciate that. So essentially, if you're new at this, what a dry sump system is you no longer are using an oil pan under your car to house the volume of oil. Okay, it's no longer pulling from said pan. With a Subaru, there are two types that you tend to see. You tend to see one that either replaces your AC compressor. That would be where the pump itself would go, and it would be powered off of the crank. Or you will see one that, like the Roger Clark Motorsports or the Daily Engineering, where they mount the pump. Essentially, they make a kind of almost a block-off plate for where the oil pan would go, and then the pump sits under there. And that's how I have the Daily Engineering, and the Roger Clark Motorsports one is designed extraordinarily well. And to be perfectly honest, if I were to do it again, probably do the Roger Clark Motorsports one. But it designed this. The concept is very similar, and that's where the pump is sitting, and then externally, the volume of oil is sitting somewhere else, usually a significantly larger volume of oil than would have normally been in your car. Like I think I'm 10 quarts to fill my system. Yeah, it's a lot. So
So the thing in both systems, you remove the oil pan and you put some kind of a plate in there, and you have either fittings to go hoses to scavenge pumps, which is basically a pump to then pull that oil from that location and send it to the tank. Or like I said, in the case of the Roger Clark system or that design, the scavenge pumps are sitting on that plate that replaces the oil pan, and those pumps grab that oil from the bottom of the engine and then send it to the tank. And then you have the pump section, which is not connected to the crank directly, like the factory pump is, and that's what's pulling the oil from the tank and sending it into the engine. Like the very simple reason why you would put the oil in a tank outside is because then you can pull from the bottom. You don't have to deal with sloshing and oil starvation issues because you've got this giant tank of oil that always has a good flow to the pump, and then the pump can send it into the engine.
Yeah. So it tends to hold. It's going to get constant pressure, significantly higher pressure, and it's pulling a gorgeous vacuum. Vacuum.
Because you have these scavenge pumps that are pulling the oil, and by merit of that, also the crankcase gases, and then sending it along that return line back to the tank. And so what you're talking about and because you have these pumps that are really good at moving, crankcase gases and all other forms of gases into the tank, that's where you have to seal off the PCV system, because you don't want to give those scavenge pumps any more air than they absolutely require, because you want them to be sending just oil back. And that's where the vacuum brake that you're talking about comes in, because that gives you control over how much vacuum you have in the crankcase.
Yes. So what I'm interested in is, so now what you're saying is you wouldn't need some sort of vacuum regulator on your block, your PCV, if you were to pull from the sump itself?
From the tank, yes.
Really?
Yeah, that's what we do. Yeah. So and the reason here is, again, even if you have a vacuum brake, so the way and just to elaborate again why you would want a vacuum brake is because you don't want too much vacuum.
Yes, there is such thing as too much vacuum. Now, so we're all on the same sheet of music if people are a little new here. Having your crankcase in vacuum is always going to lead to better performance. Not only are you going to get that shit out of your engine, but holding a vacuum within your crankcase is going to lead to just more power in general. And so when you run into we run into this every once in a while where people will talk about, well, I'm just going to run a vent to atmosphere catch can or something. That's not running under vacuum. That's not going to be anywhere near as effective. But there is such thing as, like you were just saying a second ago, too much vacuum. You can actually pull too much vacuum and cause other issues.
And the reason, the very simple top line reason for that is because you have all of these gaskets and seals and stuff on like your crank, your main seal, valve covers, you name it. There's all these seals that are designed to seal everything, but they just have a little bit of ability to seal in both directions, positive pressure and in negative pressure. And if you just seal everything off and you pulled maximum vacuum, you could actually collapse the seals inward, create vacuum leaks, pull air in from the outside, dust, all that sort of gunk. And so you basically just want to keep those seals happy. You want to keep them to the point where they're sealing. But yeah, if you can tip the scales to slight vacuum, that's way better for power. If you tip the scales to slight positive, you're losing power because, as the pistons are moving in and out of the engine bay or engine case, there's more resistance there because of that positive pressure. But then back to the air oil separator thing, that positive pressure working its way out, that's what then moves oil through the PCV system, and that's where you see all of that build up.
Yep. So, okay. So I'm actually really I'm kind of interested in seeing how my sump would set up like that, because I think I'm gonna look into that as far as the vacuum regulator, because you actually got my brain really really moving on that now, and Dylan and I are gonna have a whole conversation about this after.
Well,
I can guarantee that.
Well, and so then let me explain how the principle here by connecting the tank to the crankcase, which is so you use it. You connect it with a line. On our car specifically, we're using a dash 12. So that's 12/16 or 3/4 inch line. So the problem you have with the dry sump when you have these scavenge pumps is that you can potentially mix the oil with the gases or with air as it's getting grabbed by the scavenge pump and set back to the tank. There can be this oil froth, and you need the oil in the tank to basically kind of let go of that gas, turn back into liquid so that it can go back into the tank.
We have a separate catch can that I get the grossest stuff out of, and that's what's coming off of my sump now.
Right, and that's basically what an ARL separator or catch can is catching, because when you're running a dry sump, you're removing the PCV system, but then you're taking all of those gases and you're sending them to the tank, and now you have to deal with them there. That's what we didn't account for when we first put the dry sump on our car, and we were moving actually a ton of oil out of the tank because it was getting pressurized.
Yep.
The small version of it is in that tank. If you can pull a slight vacuum on the tank, that can help pop all the bubbles. Like if you have a container with a bunch of bubbles in it and you pull like a slight vacuum on it, all of those bubbles will pop. So it can actually help the oil in the tank turn back into liquid so it can go back into the engine. But then you also build up an equilibrium point in pressure between the tank and the crankcase when the two are just connected, and then that's where you can then run a consistent vacuum in the crankcase. So in that video, and I maybe I can put it up here or something, but basically with our race car now with the dry sump, we are holding a consistent about 0.8 to 1 psi of vacuum in the crankcase through all conditions driving on the track. And so that's with no pop-off valve or whatnot. The risk that you run with a pop-off valve, and I'm sure that there's ways to mitigate this, but it's you're allowing air to get into the crankcase that then can mix with the oil and cause frothing as it's going on its return journey into the tank.
Yes.
And
so you basically want to keep that as much of a closed system as you can. I have to be real. There's not a ton of good info out there for Subarus on dry sumps.
Yes. Doing
anything more than either drag pulls or really short, time attack kind of things. So there's not great info out there, and like honestly, you 100% have my brain moving now. Whether we implement this or not, I'm not sure, but I'm really interested to take a peek at that.
So here's the last piece of information that I'll say is the way you can control how much vacuum you have in the crankcase with this configuration is the size of the line. If you don't have enough vacuum and you need a little bit more, you go to a smaller hose. So there's more resistance on that connection to come over from the tank into the crankcase. If you have too much vacuum, you go with the larger line, so there's less resistance on this flow of pressure back and forth. That's your control mechanism, so you can get everything working properly. And you're 100% right, too. I mean, the first year we were running Pikes Peak with the dry sump, we were blowing a lot of oil out of our catch tank. And it's Pikes Peak. There's a lot of other race cars up there that are running dry sumps. So we started asking around to these guys. One solution that was pretty interesting is they were running a 3-gallon dry sump tank, and their catch can that was just on the other side of the 3-gallon tank was 2.5 gallons. That was their solution. Well, you just need a bigger tank.
Buckets. What I tell you, Warranty, about buckets.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. One of the open wheel guys had an interesting solution because they had this giant wing. And so we asked them, well, what are you guys doing? Like, oh, well, see, this is our vent tube. So they had a vent tube from the top of the tank. So they
just barfed it out, let it just shoot into the sky?
Well, kind of. They ran it all the way up to the very tip top of their rear wing, and then you see this little filter up there, and like, oh, well, because the oil can't make it up that huge hill, that's how they keep it in the sump. Like, okay, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
But our first year running this, I mean, we figured out that we could not run. I mean, if we could not run a 20-minute session at our local racetrack to test the car. It was something like we had to do like 2 or 3 laps, come in and check the oil, because there was just so much oil moving out through the vent can.
I will say we've never had that amount of oil, but I will fill my catch can with gross.
Sure.
But yeah, that does make sense. So were you running any sort of vacuum regulator or anything on it?
Well, the first year, no, because our vacuum regulator came in the day before the Pikes Peak hill climb.
Sure.
We had it on order for like 3 or 4 months from Peterson, and just could not get it. So we actually just had to put a filter on the PCV system because we knew we needed a way to control it, but we didn't know that the way to control it was connecting it to the tank. It was self-inflicted, and then knowing what we did by having just a filter on the PCV system that created that issue, that's where even running a vacuum check valve, you could potentially cause some of that issues. Actually, the more effective your scavenge pumps are, the more likely you would be to cause that same issue because you're introducing all of this extra air to the crankcase. So that's where, like, this system, having it be basically closed, and this is how OEs do it. This is, like, if you look at a schematic for like a Porsche dry sump, this is how they do it, because you can't emit all this stuff to atmosphere, and it's establishing this equilibrium point between the tank and the crankcase. That's where the magic happens, if you will.
You gave me a bit to think about on that one. That's something I'm.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to be pondering that one. I really dig that. That's got me pondering some stuff. But we got to get back on the actual topic here, which.
Oh, this is really good info.
This has been great, and I hope we can keep. I'd love to have you back on again. We can just talk about dry sump theory.
You just let me know, dude. I will clear my calendar.
Good times. This is
excellent.
This is fun stuff, and now you've got me really, really thinking about some things. But and here's what I unfortunately, there is a but. We have to have a conversation about this.
Yes.
The way the video made it sound was the real fix. It came across as everybody should have a dry sump. And I think we can both agree that's not reality.
Well, and I would both agree and disagree with that. And the reason I would say that is I think that an aero separator is going to work for a lot of people. It's going to probably work for the majority of people.
Yes.
When you put on an aero separator, as long as it's plumbed properly and as long as it's working, great. You do not need a dry sump. If you're having oil pressure issues of the engine, which, that's a whole nother topic, like pan, pickup, baffling, you name it. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
I agree.
That's where a dry sump could certainly be a fix for that. I would argue that if you are to the point where a single air oil separator, properly plumbed, properly installed, you're still having issues with moving oil through the system or overrunning the air oil separator, that is where a properly set up dry sump system is the fix. Because the only other option other than running a dry sump would be to add, say, a second air oil separator, which I've seen done. And that's okay.
This is where I want to. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of what you guys do tends to be racing oriented. Okay.
Sure. Yep.
And I think there is room for a Band-Aid. May it be an extra air oil separator, maybe a competition series style AOS if you run into issues like that. Maybe there's something else going on. There's a lot to a dry sump though.
Sure.
The total cost of a dry sump is no joke. It's $8,000 to get one in your car.
True.
Easy.
But if you
you have to find somewhere that there isn't a lot of info out there. You and I are talking, and you and I are probably the two loudest people in the United States talking about dry sumps on a Subaru. Okay, it's you and I.
Yeah.
And then 2, you have to find somewhere to put all these lines and the sump itself. Graham,
it's a pain in the butt. Yeah,
it's awful. In some cases, again, if this is not a competition-based vehicle, it's really not an option for you.
100% not. There's safety implications for a street car.
Exactly.
I maybe I didn't hit hard enough in the video, but yeah, I mean, to put a tank of that much oil into a car that is not protected by a roll cage, and you don't have a driver that is typically wearing, a fireproof race suit. I mean, there's all sorts of potential issues with impact, creating leaks. This is one of the things we had to consider. Okay, where are we going to put the tank? How do we run the lines? Because we wanted to minimize the risk of If we hit something, what are the chances that the lines would be compromised, leak oil? We want to minimize the chance that there's some kind of a fire that could happen. And like we run a fire suppression system in the Pikes Peak car.
Yep.
It's like, and that's not something that would really be feasible to put in a street car either. Yeah, I mean, pretty much if it's a street car, you just can't put in a dry sump. I mean,
there's just so many safety to a degree for a street car. And I try to have this conversation with people. There's compromises are going to have to be made, and sometimes those compromises are band-aids. Sometimes those compromises are, there's fixes, but the fix might not be what you think it is. Street cars are a different animal. But if we're talking a competition car, okay, I'll go as far as to agree with you that if the band-aids aren't working, stop trying with the band-aids. You know what I mean?
Well, let's not call it a band-aid.
Well, and if you that's fair. But either way,
here's my point here. What you're doing with an air oil separator, because like this is another question that we get that you probably get as well, is why doesn't Subaru put an air oil separator on the car to begin with? And they do. It's on the back of the engine block. It is there. It's just it's small, and so you're overrunning its capacity.
Yes.
What you're doing with an air oil separator is you're putting a bigger tank on. You're increasing the capacity.
Yep, bigger volume.
And so ultimately, I think it's the perception of an air oil separator being a solution that is what troubles me, because of the definition of a solution. Because you put it on and you think this is the solution. This has solved the problem. And for like 80-85% of the people, it does. And I think that's why it's so easy to think of it as a solution now.
I think it's more, and this is why I almost want to go back to the Band-Aid analogy, is for 80 to 85% of people out there, it is such a good Band-Aid, they don't have to think about it. Okay.
100%. Exactly.
Now, but the reality of it is it's treating a symptom, not the cause.
It's if you understand well, yeah, and if you understand that you're just changing the capacity, then like I think that's a way better way to frame what an air oil separator does. Is you're adding an extra tank, you're increasing the capacity of the factory PCV system, but it still can be overrun.
Yes.
And ultimately, my other point is just that I think if we can start focusing on crankcase pressure, and this is not an easy solution, but if we can start thinking about crankcase pressure to try and solve the problem,
the entire aftermarket should. I would even go as far as to say the entire aftermarket should seriously think about that,
because this is, we as a community all benefit if we figure out the solution. If we really figure out a solution that isn't a dry sump. If we can figure out a way to increase the capacity of the PCV system and deal with crankcase pressure, maybe as two separate items, so that we get a solution that is not necessarily a dry sump, but is something that is well enough that it works for 95% of everybody out there. It means that there's more Subarus that are running out there that are not having these issues, that we don't have all these people that are saying, the Subarus are so unreliable, just get anything but a Subaru if you want to track it. Because I don't think that's right. I mean, there's ways.
It's not fair to point at Subarus as this just being a Subaru problem either.
Right.
Like crankcase pressure is an issue in. Have you ever driven an old DSM? Like you could rev the thing and fire its dipstick. Like it's just not a Subaru specific issue. What I think is really wild is the amount of people who call us with all sorts of different platforms. And they modify our air oil separators, which an air oil separator is not some, insane. It's not like we reinvented the wheel to make the air oil separator. Our air oil separator is built really nice, and that's why we get people with other platforms wanting them. Yeah. And the volume's fairly large, so we get guys with like twin turbo LSs will call us and they want two of our air oil separators to use on them, and they run and they're they love them, but it's not a Subaru specific problem is what I'm trying to get at. But Subaru's
it's very
symptoms
it's very focused from Subarus,
Well, the symptoms from it with that can happen from bad PCV tend to affect Subarus harder. Is kind of our engines are really prone to not dealing with knock very well. It's already a turbocharged engine, and they also burn oil just naturally. So an air oil separator is an elegant, it's an elegant solution for a lot of people. But maybe it's not the solution for everybody. But unfortunately, it's what we have available currently. But yeah, I'm wholeheartedly, of the belief that no matter what, we should be trying to do this, faster, higher, better, and improve as a community to do this better.
So, in the last point that I will make here, that's I think is worth mentioning, and is to pay attention to crankcase pressure, because if you have a race car, if you have a street car, what have you, and you have an aerial separator installed, the way that you can tell if this is going to work or not is to look at what happens to your crankcase pressure, either on the dyno, on the track, or something like that.
Nobody monitors their crankcase pressure.
Right.
And that was really enlightening to us. We did it when we first installed Graham's dry sump way back in the day, and then like on my car, this is just how it works, so it is what it is. And we really didn't start monitoring it until this past year, and we learned a lot from it. We also learned that it's actually common for, like, especially larger powered 4-cylinders at, in extreme circumstances, like let's talk the top of 5th gear at the on the back straight mid Ohio, for you to see a slight bit of positive pressure. Now, with that stated, I'm actually kind of interested to see if your solution might help with that. So we're gonna chat. Me and the brains are gonna get together, because I'm kind of interested in your theories behind that, because I think it might.
Well, and yeah, I mean, there's, for crankcase pressure, there's a lot of variables to it. But if you so Harvey, this buddy of mine that got me into Subarus, and he's now a tuner. He's the guy that, one of the first people, because I've known him forever, when I had this idea about looking at crankcase pressure. So he now basically monitors crankcase pressure on all the cars that he tunes, and he's found out crazy things and seen a whole lot of stuff. And I can tell you that when he's tuning a car, he's told me that, like, well, if I see crankcase pressure go up, like, I know that there's an issue with their PCV system. And like, he's actually stopped tuning cars that actually had failed engines because he sees what's happening with crankcase pressure, and so he's had a lot less issues where
you could see a small ringland failure or something, like pressure getting around. If your crankcase pressure goes up, you're gonna see things. Like, I think more tuners should do that.
Yeah, for him as a tuner,
you could build something pretty easy to do that. I mean, I think when on Graham's original one, we just made a oil cap that we put a pressure sensor in, and it told us pretty much anything we needed to know.
So Harvey just uses a Subaru oil cap, because I actually made it for him, because all the Subaru oil caps pretty much are the same. So you just put a vacuum fitting on an oil cap, and you can put it on pretty much any Subaru that comes in.
Tuners, listen to this.
Short of that, like on our Pikes Peak car, because we don't have an oil cap anymore. We just have one of the fittings off the valve covers with an AN fitting, a small AN fitting that we can then put a vacuum or a
we actually took it a step further, and we actually log it now, so it's going to our ECU, which is nice. That has been really interesting, and where that's how we, I know at the end of the straight in mid Ohio, I was seeing a hair of positive pressure. We adjusted the vacuum thing a little bit. It is what it is, but it was
the data, knowing to look at
data. It's the same thing. Yes. Like, honestly, if you are doing motorsports oriented stuff, you shouldn't be doing it on a stock ECU, because the conversation that you and I are having right now, like, you could log this stuff and you could overlay it with, anything else, or you could set up fail safes that if you start seeing a lot of positive pressure, it starts throwing a check engine light, like you can, this, I can't stress it enough. Standalone engine management, if you have a track car, is imperative.
And honestly, what I'm trying to figure out now is a good way to data log this without having a standalone, because I think that's one of the missing pieces.
What conversation are we having right now? Get a stand. Are you serious? You're trying to do this with a damn? I mean, I know how you could do it. If you want to log it, okay?
Yeah, it's any
you
kind
get
of
an
logging
AIM
with pressure
Solo
sensor.
DL. You get an AIM Solo DL, and you could log it that way.
But see, just to your same point about dry sumps not being, it's an expensive solution. It's not the solution for everybody. If more people that were just tracking their cars could log just your crankcase pressure and oil pressure, oil temperature, that if that ability to log was much more attainable, then we would all have a way better picture of what's going on with our engines.
So are you saying maybe we had maybe Cobb released an oil, a crankcase pressure cap, or we released a crankcase pressure cap, but we had to find a way to get it via CAN into an access port.
Yeah, I know that there's some guys,
tough, but I'm with you. I'm feeling this. I have a feeling
even an external recorder, I think, would just to have that information, just to know what's going on with the crankcase. Because if you're tracking your car and you have a picture of what's going on with your crankcase pressure as you're lapping the car, that's going to tell you a ton of is this system working?
If I have somebody make this, you better buy it.
Not only will I buy it, but Dewey, we're IAG dealers. We've been dealers forever.
I know. No. I don't know if we have the bandwidth to do it here, but I got guys outside of us who might be interested, dude.
Okay.
Honestly, if you and I were to hit up somebody like iWire, or I've got some buddies, Warranty knows what I'm talking about. I bet you we could make Noah build this.
There has to be a way to do this for sure, and it's just
that would be simple and reasonably priced.
And my argument is that getting that kind of data, just a couple small data points that you can log and see what was happening in real time as you're using the car, like going around the track or as you would normally drive it. That's one of these last pieces of the puzzle that's missing to figure out, like, is this actually working? Is this not? What do I actually need to do to fix this problem? And that's what we need.
Yeah. No, I think that's I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And I think people could see failures before they turn into catastrophic things too.
You'll see issues before they become failures.
Yes, which would be awesome.
Yes.
Instead of, it's awful when you see people with completely annihilated engines. And then you hand them the bill for that. You can save yourself thousands of dollars spending a couple hundred.
Oh man, yeah. There's so many self-inflicted injuries that we've done to our engines by mistakes, improper plumbing, what have you. That, like, if you guys are looking at this information, and I will tell you, like, this is what I've done. If you just have a boost gauge, you can connect a boost gauge, because that reads pressure and vacuum, to your crankcase. And then that's all that you would need if you wanted an actual gauge to see what's going on in the crankcase. It doesn't move a lot, though, because you're just talking about maybe 1 psi, 2 psi in either direction. So it's not going to move a lot, but that's all you need to do to actually see what's going on in the crankcase. But being able to log it, that's the missing piece of the puzzle, so you can actually see what's happening in real time.
So we have one more topic I want to hit before we.
Yes, and I think it's related to this. It's related to this.
It kind of is. Kind of is.
It's not related. Well, it is. It's all about the community.
It is.
It's all about the community.
It is. It's about it. How great would it be if we get this thing built and we're working together? Now, you and I, we've had our differences in opinion for the most part, but honestly, not really. Like, we tend to have discussions, and really, we tend to both be coming from the same direction. Maybe we say it differently. Okay,
or just different sides of the same. Yeah.
Yeah, but with that stated, the community is always what's in mind. That's always been, first and foremost, community's been huge for me, and I've said it a million times. This community has given me everything that I have. My wife, my kids, my job, my everything that most people know about me in one way or another is 1 degree separated from me owning a Subaru. I love this community. And it really, and I want to say that like anybody who goes into this industry to try to with a community oriented mindset, we're kind of a tight knit community, but there's enough of the pie for everybody, and there's room for discussion and different opinions and approaches. And that's what makes this fun. This is all it's a hobby, it's a passion, and we should be having these conversations. And when the community comes together with different ideas and different mindsets, that's when good stuff comes from it. But there's certain ways to go about things and certain ways you probably shouldn't. There was a video released by a particular small engine builder based out of Illinois recently that man, I just don't get it. I don't understand. I don't want to shed too much light on this video, but I don't understand Subaru on Subaru community violence. I never have. Like, I understand we're all in kind of competition, and you know, if it's friendly, that's great. But this wasn't friendly. That video is bad. And then in the meantime, like in the comments, that same person decided to pick a fight with basically every other major engine builder in the community. And I just don't know why. Like, I don't even know where to go with this, but
well, it all comes back to the community, right?
It does.
Because you know, I was thinking about this the other day, because when the 2004 S10 landed, that was the first 2.5 liter engine that we had seen, right? And I remember in those early years that there's a lot of discussion. There was a lot of guys in the Subaru community that got STIs. They had them, they liked them, but then they sold them and they went to Evos. And the reason at the time was, I heard many, many times, well, if you want to make big power, you've got to go to the Evo because you just can't do it on a Subaru.
Yes.
And there was a time early on there in 04, 05, 06 where
it was the truth.
It was new. We didn't. I mean, there were so many obstacles that we just didn't know. We were doing wrong.
So the 4G, that's a great place to start with this. Okay, so let's start with that conversation, because that was a platform that had already existed within the States and in Japan for years.
Exactly.
Yeah, it got a new body, but that basic engine had been around for a really long time, and its quirks were fairly sorted out. When we got the new 2.5 liter, that we understood how to make a little bit of power with EJs, and you know, the Australians are making some bigger power at that point. But this new 2.5 liter was a new animal, and we were having all sorts of issues trying to figure out how that was going to work.
Yeah, that Evo community, they had a 10-year head start. They had tried and figured out a whole bunch of stuff that the Subaru community had not, and we had a completely new platform. It took a couple of years, even for people to kind of start to figure out what the limitations were and how to address them. But we as a community, we as the Subaru community, we talked. You know, people tried things. You know, there were a couple guys that got these engines and blew them up just to see what the weak points were. And then, like you were talking about Nasiak earlier, and then like we had this discussion that was available to, you know, any and all people that were interested, so we could bounce ideas back and forth. Hey,
it's one of the reasons this community got so big. And
yes,
honestly, it's one of the reasons it got lucrative too, is because there were a ton of people. But with that, then you start drawing in different crowds. But yeah, we had this huge discussion on different ways to do this. I mean, early on, we were trying to sleeve these things and do all sorts of stuff because cylinder walls were such a problem, and we were blowing head gaskets out of it, and you know,
all of the solutions that we have now we're standing on the shoulders of all those guys, you know, 5, 10, 15 years ago that saw this problem and tried to figure out, well, what's going on here, you know, and I mean, that in part that's been my motivation to try and dive into like this catch can aerial separator whole thing, to try and like figure out what's going on so that we can find a better solution. And that's been the pattern in the Subaru community. There are those of us in the community that let's figure out what's going on here. Let's try and find out what the actual problem is so we can find out what the actual solution is so that we can raise the bar. And you look at where we are now with Subarus, and like back then, 2004, 5, 6, I mean, maybe even 2010, if you would have told me that there would be like a couple prescribed paths to make 1,000 horsepower in an EJ25,
right?
I'd say you're completely out of your mind. It's impossible.
Yep.
It is just physically impossible to do that, and yet here we are.
Hey, so closed decking was this huge. Like we all tried to run sleeves. Okay, everybody tried to run sleeves,
right,
and
so
they just don't play well. What's up?
Let's go through the progression from sleeves to closed decking and why we moved from one to the other.
Yep. Well, I mean, let's start from the bottom. So we started with stock 2.5s and realized, it was ringlands, things like that. And tuning was a little rudimentary at that point too. So let's add some of that in there.
And fueling.
And so fueling was huge, especially with those side feeds. We were putting in these old P850s that were just blowing shit up left and right.
Old
but we kind of got that
yeah.
sorted out. So we went through like mid 300s, then to 400. Then we realized after we built the engines, we put better pistons in it, better rods. We could get these things to hold up pretty well until we hit a certain point. And then we started running into cylinder wall problems because the cylinder walls, honestly, that block was never designed to be a turbo engine. It was some lower compression pistons were thrown in, some extra supports, and then out the door it went and was told, hey, you're a turbo engine now. You can really tell by the piston design. It really wasn't meant to be a turbo engine, and the cylinder walls are just thin on a 2.5 liter. So right. I have personally cracked cylinder walls at 430 wheel horsepower, like cracked.
Oh my gosh.
So it definitely can happen. And so what people would then do is they kind of looked over at the Honda community, who are also running aluminum blocks, which were, questionable. And they were dropping sleeves into them.
Yeah.
So they would get an iron sleeve and they would, machine out basically the cylinder walls and press these sleeves in. And that would hold the boost. We wouldn't crack the cylinder walls anymore. But the problem is our cases wiggle around so much that they would, the sleeve would eventually just drop and it would move around and you'd have head gasket issues.
Right.
Also, at the same time, we figured out that the 11 millimeter head stud wasn't enough. The head studs, I think a lot of people thought they were going to solve the head gasket issue with the sleeves with bigger head studs. Obviously, that didn't work out. Right. Proven power bragging is somebody should just literally write a whole documentary on this. And then I remember this post really well on Nasiak when it was Dom, who worked at Maxwell Power at the time, gave they were doing closed deck. No, sorry. It was out front. It was out front to start it. Out front gave a guy a closed deck block, like built block, and essentially told him to try to break this block. Okay, tuned correctly. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but it was a fairly large turbo, like a 35R or something at the time. That was massive. Guy was making like 600 plus horsepower on the street, which at the time was insanity. And it held up really well. And I remember us all following that. And that moment changed so much with Subarus because at that point we weren't shoehorned into this like, you're about 450 wheel is anything you're ever going to make in any prayer of it staying together for any amount of time.
Yeah. And the key here doing with the sleeves is you could make more power, but anybody that tried to put them in a street car because of all the potential issues you get from heat cycling them, like they were having sleeves drop, 5, maybe you were lucky enough to get a whole year out of the engine, but like when you're looking at what it would cost to put together a sleeved block and then know this is going to last me 6 months to a year. It really was for race application only. It just was not practical for most people.
And that's drag application. Like that race isn't even that was not the heat cycling that would happen within a road course use. 3 events lucky, if you're lucky.
And so the threshold was low. Like if you want to make more than that horsepower, you got to look somewhere else. And then the closed decking came along. Yep.
And that changed everything because that allowed us to the limitation no longer was the block. It became the thing holding us up for horsepower was heads. And how can we keep these things on there? There's been, we're using the Firelock system now. Other companies have tried other things, O-ringing and stuff like that. But that really all started coming in after closed decking became, we solved the problem with the cylinder walls.
Yep.
And then it started moving on from there. And man, that was such a massive progression. And this was coming from a bunch of different companies trying all sorts of different things. And there's some of us still have different processes and reasonings behind those processes. And so
back to this point. It's because people in the community are finding these solutions. They're finding what the problem is. There's an open dialogue. You're trying this guy's trying that. You can come together and say, well, I found that works, but I have this issue. This guy says, well, I solved that issue, but I have this other issue. We can find these solutions, and it raises the bar for everybody. As once we work through these problems, it just raises the bar. That's how we've got to this point now where it's possible. Like if you wanted to make 1,000 horsepower, you're not, taking a moonshot and trying to reinvent the wheel. We're standing on the shoulders of all these guys that have done all of this research, all of this testing, and had all of these conversations, and have now come out with these solutions.
Yep. And like we have, and what's crazy is a lot of people came at it at a bunch of different angles, and there was a lot of debate on the right and wrong way to do it.
Yep.
And to some degree, we've all kind of came to the same-ish solution, but a lot of that was done through discussion and working together, even as, competitors within the same market of trying different things. And there was information sharing through all sorts of different, lanes and deck. And what really stinks is when you have a situation like that video, okay, where I don't believe that there's any reason that said person couldn't, if it couldn't have been successful within the market, and went on to do great things. And we sell, Firelock head gaskets and 14 mil head studs to direct competitors to us because it just makes sense. And again, we're truly of the belief that this pie's big enough for everybody. We're a tight knit community, but why wouldn't we help you out? You know what I mean? And they're by burning bridges like that, not only with us, but everybody else, like you're going to lose that. You're going to lose that ability to have those conversations. And that's terrifying. If somebody's willing to burn relationships like that, just absolutely melt bridges down like that, are they really?
Why
would you want to work with somebody like that?
And I think I understand wanting to differentiate yourself.
Sure.
Obviously that's what we're all trying to do. But I think it's like there's ways to do it that are more constructive, and then there's not. And I think that one of the funniest things about this community is it is almost shocking how small of a community it is, even in terms of different manufacturers.
Yeah.
We have kind of a luxury in not being a manufacturer, so I talk to a lot of different people, and like this, like, oh well, I was talking to this guy from this shop and over at that shop. There's a lot of.
It's also one of the reasons that your opinion carries quite a bit of weight. Okay, and because you are using stuff, you're using it on your own accord, not and that really carries weight. That's why I really like seeing somebody like you guys put stuff out as opposed to, I try to keep this as community oriented as I can, but the reality of it is, and I'm not telling you to stop listening to me, anybody on here, but I work for IAG. Okay. I'm going to recommend our air oil separator. Okay, I'm going to recommend our engines. I work for IAG. Okay,
Well,
but you don't. You know, and that should hold weight with people. People should think about where they're getting their information from, and I don't think a lot of people do that these days.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think you're 100% right. I think that that's something that we've overlooked, and it's something where I try and consider every time we put something out, a piece of information out, because I want to make sure that it's as right as it can be.
Yes.
Because I don't want to confuse people. I don't want to mislead people. Do I always get it right? No. But I do my best, and I think that
human. I mean, and I can understand a clickbaity title. Sure. It doesn't mean I'm not going to give you shit about it, but
that's fine. That's fine. but ultimately, like there's so much that if you're in the Subaru community, you have, like, at some point you have to pull back and go, like, man, the community is just so valuable. There's just something special here.
We wouldn't still be here if it wasn't. Now, I don't want to be this guy, but I'm going to flat out say it. How many Evo-centric shops or builders or just brands in general still exist?
Do we lose?
It's not many.
They're gone, man. And all of them dove into other stuff. You know, and not that they still, you have a lot of them out there that are still supporting, the Evo community, because that's probably how they got to where they're at. Doing transmissions or still building parts and stuff, but their focus is completely on other things now. But you really don't have that with Subarus. Subarus are Subarus. Like, and that's why I try to tell people, like, I get a lot of people, hey man, where should I take this car or this engine to get installed or whatever? You need to find your local Subaru shop, whoever's closest to you, and they need to be Subaru oriented. Where should I get this tuned? Somebody who tunes Subarus, not some dude who tunes Lamborghinis and is great at that. Like Subaru.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to do that. And a lot of communities don't. Like, we've got a guy in here who's been talking in our chat the whole time. He seems like he's big in the Miata community. The Miata community has that sort of support, and then we have this huge advantage of having that sort of support within the Subaru community. Now, sometimes it does feel like Subarus versus the world, and believe me, I feel it all the time with the way grid life rules are written.
Right.
But, honestly, sometimes that kind of makes it fun because it is us versus the world. And, everybody bags on us so hard that we kind of can't afford to crap on each other. We do need to stick together. And if one of us wins, all of us are winning.
Exactly. 100%. And Dewey, like, I have no problem with being Subaru versus world because I know I have the Subaru community backing me.
Yes.
And that's, we need to preserve that. We need to keep that going. And I think that's just something that we all just have to kind of keep in mind, as we are supporting manufacturers, shops, you name it, is the support the guys that are supporting the community.
Yep. And it's you've got to get behind the communities, the community oriented shops, the community oriented brands. I can't stress it enough. I have no tolerance for that sort of attitude. And like, this is probably all you're going to see out of us, like, even responding to that, because it's really not even worth our time. But I wanted to, it was something that I knew you'd understand, that I wanted to hear your opinion on that. It kind of landed exactly where I figured it would.
Yeah.
The community means so much to me, and I know it means a ton to you. And that's why, like, let's be real. Neither of us are going to get rich doing this. It ain't happening.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. It's not why you're here.
It's not. And I like, even to a certain degree, don't get me wrong. Like, the guy who owns this company is doing pretty good for himself. Okay. But he would be doing better if he did something else. You have to have some passion for this to do what we're doing. And it all comes back to community in one way or another. And if the second you start ignoring that, or the second you turn your back on that or don't understand that, is the second you're going to find the door real fast.
100%.
While you guys were talking about dry subs and AOSs, speaking of community, we had Johnny Trans in the chat who
Yeah, he
pulled
did.
off a tail shaft on a 2020 STI transmission.
We
and
saved you,
proved
John.
Amazing.
was-
Amazing.
It was community like this that I just love. We have an answer that Subaru's wording probably a little misleading.
You
There's still a
think?
mechanical center differential in the 2018 and beyond STI transmissions. This is what I
Dip
love.
didn't change, and I told you it didn't change, but
I
whatever.
know.
Word salad, let's party. I will agree that the way the wording changed, they made it seem like something changed. I think maybe they goofed around with some of the like software, but that was about it. Probably,
Or maybe they even just thought that the ad copy was a little bit too confusing.
maybe. I tell you what, nobody has ever been able to explain DCCD from Subaru that in a proper manner. I mean, even me trying to simplify it as much as I could still took me a solid 15 minutes on a podcast a while back to explain this is how DCCD actually works.
Yep. I have a pet theory that Subaru is a 100% Japanese company and Subaru of America is just a distributor. That they do marketing and a little bit of market research, and that's
these
it.
days that I get. I don't think they
there's
no
engineers.
Some translation.
There's dudes like you and I that work at the company, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Could be. You might not be too far off the mark there.
Yeah, and it's not. And again, I still love this community. I wish SOA would get more involved with the community aspect of this, but it doesn't mean I don't love this brand, and I don't. I love the people behind it. But
yeah, I mean, honestly, it's the community of people that love these cars, and that's you put the two of them together, you cannot go wrong.
No,
that is the winning formula.
Great. So we're gonna see you out at some more Time Attack events maybe this year. Why don't you come on out? Come hang out, man.
I do not travel well. I need to. I honestly, we're a small shop. Like the whole thing here, there's 6 of us, and I have to run the thing, and I struggle to pull myself away. But I really want to get out. We're wrestling with our race car right now, and my gosh, it's was it the 11th of April, and we test on Pikes Peak on June 1st. So we've got like 6 weeks left to get this thing sorted. Once that's done, maybe.
After you guys get through Pikes Peak, if you need some help, it would be really cool to maybe see you guys come out to Lime Rock, like the Lime Rock Festival, or come to a festival, drag the stuff out to one of these like cool tracks. And it'd be great to see you guys out there. Even if you're just out there turning laps, having a good time. If there's anything I can do on my end to help out, I'd be more than happy to help.
I appreciate that. The goal is this is the kind of the last heavy lift on this car for a good while. And so once we get this sorted, we're getting the sequential in and getting that all working. And once that's all done, the idea is to just get Scott in the car and let him drive it. And then I mentioned I need to get my 6-speed in, and then I just need to get in my car and drive it. And so that's where okay, let's just go out and use these things again. Let's just stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Just
I'm willing to believe your car is not far out of running street class. Let's see what we can do about getting you into street. That'd be fun.
Okay, deal. Yes, I need to do it. It's just you get this tunnel vision and like months go by.
Mm-hmm.
And then scope creep happens real fast, and then you're you're staring at your car, and this thing that was supposed to be real simple now has 50 more hours added to it because you're like, well, while I'm in there, I should, and then everything.
And it's 3 days before the event.
And it's 3 days before the event.
I tell you what, when you work at a place where you could just look at the shelf and go like, well, I should really do that, and if I'm doing that, I should really do this. It sometimes it is your enemy. It's not your friend if you're trying to get stuff done.
It's the worst. It's the worst. It's like a big menu at a restaurant.
Yes. I'll have everything. Give me one of everything.
All of this sounds good.
Why does my tummy hurt?
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Do I want the duck sauce or the eel sauce? I don't know.
Yes.
All right, man. This has been a riot. If people needed to contact you, have any questions, where's the best place to get a hold of you or check out your wares?
Yeah, so flatirons.tuning.com. We have a live chat. You can hop in the live chat. I'm not in there usually these days, but the guys, I mean, we're literally right next to each other, so they can grab me if they need to. You can always send an email to the contact us link on flatirons.tuning.com. That goes to all of us. If you want to talk to me or you got a question for me, just mention that in the email, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as I can.
There you go. And if they needed to, I'm gonna plug your YouTube channel. Your
Oh, yeah.
YouTube channel is fantastic. Guys, go check out their YouTube channel. He's got a ton of really, really solid just tech videos up.
Flatirons Tuning.
It's Flatirons Tuning. It's great. Go check it out. Then yeah, dude, I'd love to do this again. We can just shoot the shit some more, or maybe we come up with another really good topic, or maybe we'll get a round table, a bunch of us, nut jobs, and we can all just bounce bad ideas off each other. I think it'd be great.
Round table.
100%. You know what? I'll throw out, because I've been getting a lot of questions about this, and I'm not the expert, but I'd be happy to be a part of the conversation. New cars, the FA20s, FA24s. It seems like there's a lot of those new community members that they've got a lot of these same questions that we had when the EJ was new. Be fun to have a conversation just about the new cars.
I think they're screwed because they don't have Nasiak like we did.
You're not entirely wrong. You're not
the
wrong.
problem is the internet just forgets immediately. Remember back in the day, you'd have it all the time. Somebody would ask some question, what kind of oil should I use in my, and immediately they just get nailed with search. But they would learn how to go look for information, and they had this great resource.
Gentlemen, now it is YouTube and to a lesser extent Reddit, if you're willing to invest into that platform. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
YouTube is great.
Yes,
and
it
I think
is.
you're doing.
I think
you're doing God's work over there.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying. We're going to keep
Short
after it.
And long form.
Yes.
All right, guys. Like I said, this was great. We do got to call it quits at some point. We did do an hour and 45 minminutes. And,
holy gosh! Oh
my
gosh!
It happens fast, right? I told you we run on a different schedule over here.
Oh my gosh! Yep.
I'm gonna So it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun, and let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John.